Today we're going to start painting our clay project. So what we'll be working on top of is our project board covered in tinfoil. So you're going to put a piece of tinfoil on your table. You're going to set your board on top, and then you're just going to fold the sides over. And then when you turn it over, now you've got a board covered in tinfoil. And the reason we do this is because as you paint your clay project, when the paint touches the tinfoil, it won't stick to it. Okay, so each of you will get your project, and I want you to focus on the lid first. Now, this one wasn't finished with 3D details, but if you also were an absent student who didn't have time to sculpt your thematic pieces on the top or carve your designs, then you're going to have just a plain lid. So you are welcome to draw designs if you want to on the lid to help you know where to put your paint. And remember that your clay box should be telling a story about your interests, your hobbies for a theme. So I want you to focus on the lid first, so you can actually take the lid off and set it next to your project. But also, consider this. When your lid is sitting on your box, you're going to see the side of that lid. So when we do our painting, you're going to paint the top of the lid plus all the sides. Now, you don't really need to worry about painting the bottom of the lid because that isn't going to be seen. Okay, so we are working with a paint called acrylic, and acrylic paint dries permanent. So the great thing about acrylic paint is once it's dry, if you don't like what you see, you can paint right over the top of it next class and change the color. But the bad part about acrylic paint is that it will stain your clothes. So I recommend you push up your long sleeves, you put on an apron to cover the front of you. The sooner you find paint on your clothes, go to the sink and get soap and water and a paper towel and start scrubbing it. Then let me know and I will give you some stain remover. All right, this is what my painting supplies look like. At every table, you will have a tray with an egg carton with all my paint colors in it and a pile of paint brushes. So what you'll be doing is taking the popsicle sticks for the paint color that you want to work with, and you'll be putting a stick inside that color. Now, these sticks have already been used by my 8th graders, so they have dried paint on the end of it. If there's chunks on it, you could pull those off if they're sticking out quite a bit. And just try your best to match the color of what it looks like. So this is a purple one. So if I want purple paint, I'm going to put that popsicle stick in the purple, and I'm going to use that stick to scoop out the paint and put it on my paint tray. So each of you is going to get a styrofoam plate and a Sharpie marker. You need to write your name on the back of the plate because this is your plate to use for the rest of the project. You get one plate, and that's what we use to put our paint on. When we clean up, we just set our plates with our projects on our shelf to reuse them the next day. Okay, so if I know that I want purple, I'm going to take my popsicle stick and I'm going to scoop up some purple paint, and I'm going to wipe that on the edge of my plate so that I can use this middle area to do mixing. Now, this is not a lot of paint, and it's a small plate because your project is not that big. It doesn't take a lot of paint to cover the surface. You are welcome to use the paint straight from the tray, or you're welcome to mix your own paint colors. So if I want to make a lavender, I'm going to need white paint. Now, I'm going to get the white and I'm going to wipe it on its own place on my plate. Notice the stick did not touch the purple paint. As soon as I'm done using that, it goes right back in the same color that it came from so that we're not contaminating the sticks. The paint in the egg cartons should stay pure and it shouldn't have other colors mixed into it. So when I need to mix my paint colors, I'm going to use the back end of my paintbrush. I'm not going to use the bristles. So when I mix colors, I always want to put the darker color into the lighter color. So I'm going to scoop up some paint on the back of my brush, and now I'm going to start to mix it into the white. If I decide that that paint needs to become darker, I'm just going to keep adding a little bit dark color at a time. So then when I'm done, I just kind of roll the extra paint off on the plate, and then I use my paper towel and I just wipe off the end of my stick, and that's all I need to do to clean my paintbrush. Okay, so when you are painting, you're going to be using paintbrushes that were also used by another class. I would not trust that the previous class cleaned them well enough. So at your tables, you're also going to have a Tupperware with a floating sponge and some water. I would rinse that brush in the water, kind of wipe it off on the sponge to get a little water off of it, and then I would dry it to test that it's a clean brush. You'll be able to tell if there was paint left in that brush. Okay, so when I start to paint, I don't want to jam the paint all the way up into the metal part of the brush. I don't want the paint coming up here in the ferrule. It should stay just on the bristles. So I'm just going to take a little bit of paint at a time. Notice it's not up in the metal part. And then I'm going to start to paint the design that I want on my lid. Now, when I paint, I want to make sure this is going on nice and smooth and flat. I don't want to paint chunks like this. If you see chunks on the lid, it is going to dry like that. And that, in my opinion, just looks messy and it's wasting paint. Look how much paint that glob actually was when I spread this out. And you do get a painting grade based on how neat you paint and how thoroughly it covers the clay. And if you see that there's clay showing through, then that's how you know you need a little more paint or a second layer. Now, the other nice thing about acrylic paint is that if the paint is wet, you can mix colors right on your lid. So say I want this light purple to fade into a dark purple. I can take my dark purple and I can paint right over the top of the light purple. And I can pull that paint towards the lighter area, and this is how I can get a fade. This is what we call value. And then if I want to give it a little more lighter, I can add lighter and try to get that to blend a little more smoothly. Okay? So again, paint any designs that you want on the surface, but also consider what size paintbrush you're using. So your tray has a variety of paintbrush sizes on it. Make sure you're using an appropriate size brush for the area you are painting. If you're painting a large flat area, get a bigger brush, like one of these two brushes are the bigger brushes. If you're painting a very small detail area, then you want to work with a pointy end brush to keep the paint only where you want it on the detail things. But also remember, I want to paint the edge of my lid. So while I have this paint color mixed, I can paint the sides of my lid because I will see that when it's sitting on top of my box. Then when I'm done using that paint color, I need to clean my brush. So the sponge floating on the water is to start your brush with. So I kind of get it wet and I wipe it across the sponge. The sponge is going to pull a majority of the paint off. Then I switch to swishing it in the bottom. I should not be splashing water out of the container. And then I'm ready to use that exact same brush. I just dry it off and I switch my paint colors. So when you are finished painting, I should see neatness in the lid itself. And here's an example of a project I made previously. So you can see where I had my crayon sculpted. The paint is only on the crayon and it's not on the area surrounding the crayon because I used a very small paintbrush to keep the paint exactly where I want it. But then also, when you're done with your lid, paint the sides of your box. So you are welcome to paint designs around all the edges of your box. But if it comes down to you're running out of time, just paint it one solid color. But then also, it's best to paint the background first. So I painted this silver to begin with, and then I painted my crayons because they sit on top. So you'll have about 3 or 4 class periods to do your painting. At the end of class, when you are finished, you are welcome to put your lid on your box if you need to make more room for your plate, or you can just leave it like this. The plate really isn't going to hurt anything, so it can sit on top of your box. Then you're going to carefully carry your board with your plate and your project and put it on the assigned shelf that you used when you made the clay piece. And then together, what you need to do is clean all these paint brushes and set them on top of your tray. Then, if you are the last 6th grade class of the day, you also need to pull out the popsicle sticks. So on the outside edge of the tray, you're going to lean the popsicle stick, and it shouldn't touch another stick because then they get stuck together. And then really when you put your sticks in your egg carton, I would only use the colors that you actually need. If nobody's going to use pink today, don't bother putting a pink stick in. So your sticks lay along the edge, your paintbrushes are away from the stick, so your paintbrushes are not touching the wet paint and getting dirty again. And then I will come collect the paints from your tables, and then I will dismiss you to wash hands.